So he was born in 1906 in a village near Cairo, Egypt, etc. He came from a well-educated family. His father was a local Islamic scholar. He studied at the University of Cairo, where he attained a degree in Arabic literature. And after graduating, he basically trained as a teacher, and later he played various educational roles, etc. Now, the interesting thing about Sayyid Qutb is that, in fact, he went to the United States of America on an all-paid junket by the Egyptian government. The Egyptian government would send people, the teachers, etc., to America. Dekho jaake what life is like over there and learn something from there, etc. So he went to America, but he was repulsed by what he saw there. He saw that America is very materialistic. He saw that it was very, secular. He saw a lot of sexual promiscuity, etc. Although this is back a long time ago, so I don't know how promiscuous United States of America was at that time. But anyway, this turned him off United States of America and off Western civilization as a whole. And he came back in the 1940s, and he then decided to join the Ikhwan al-Muslimin, which, as you know, had already been set up by Hassan al-Banna. He wrote a very important work called Milestones in 1964, in which he attacks both modernity and secularism and also socialism. In 1954, after an attempted assassination of President Gamal Abdel Nasser, Sayyid Qutb and many other Brotherhood members were arrested, and he was sentenced to death in 1966 for trying to assassinate the Egyptian president, that is Nasser. The incident also is very, very famous for Arabs, etc., because somebody came to a Nasser's rally and fired 6 shots at him at almost point blank range and missed somehow or the other. And Nasser was not at all fazed by that. And he said, if Egypt wants my blood, it is. He went on with his speech and he said, if Egypt wants my blood, it is here for you to take, etc. And crowd went absolutely crazy. Oh my God, this is a man who's not even scared of death, etc. and so on. So anyway, but Ikhwan al-Muslimin was implicated in that, although Sayyid Qutb directly, whether he was responsible for that, is something that remains a big debate. Many Ikhwan al-Muslimin people claim that Nasser had the whole thing staged, although Ikhwan al-Muslimin, as you already know, did have a history of assassinating Egyptian heads of state. So that was not altogether out of the realm of possibility. He was of the view that all secular governments are basically jahil. Doesn't matter whether they are welfare states like exist in Sweden or whatever. Doesn't matter if they are communist states like China or Soviet Union. Doesn't matter if they are liberal states like the United States of America, France or England or whatever. Doesn't matter, nationalist, Yevo. Doesn't matter to me. All secular states are basically jahil states, etc. They belong to the Dore Jahiliyyah. The transgression of divine authority is found in Enlightenment rationalism and European colonialism, he writes. Marxism and positivism, materialism, Darwinism, Zionism and Arab socialism, all of this is jahalat, etc. And we must reject it. Why? Because of the fundamental idea that all of them transgress divine authority. So all of them are the child of Enlightenment, etc., which they are. That's not incorrect to say. And all of them therefore transgress divine authority, and we should be against all of them. Materialism, science, rationalism, etc. are all false gods for him. Science here means that if you're using science not for any specific thing, like you're learning computers, that's not necessarily a bad thing or whatever. But if you're using science as a way to understand the world and history, in a materialist scientific interpretation of history or whatever, yes, at the epistemic level that would be very problematic. Qutb also argued for the exaltation of action as a criteria of faith. Jihad is part of faith. It's not enough to just say your prayers and do your Hajj, Roza, Namaz, etc. You have to fight for the establishment of an Islamic government, etc. And this is the exaltation that is necessary to prove that you really are a Muslim. And to those who do that, there will be signposts along the road, milestones along the road that you know you're going in the right direction. He says democracy and Marxism are both absolutely wrong. Democracy is bankrupt and Marxism is against human nature. So he rejects both. He says the Renaissance in the 16th century reached its heyday in the 18th and 19th centuries, has also come to an end as it does not possess this spirit of renewal, etc. So not only is democracy bankrupt, Marxism is bekar, Renaissance is bekar, nationalism has also withered, both individualist and collective theories have ended in failure, sab theories fail ho gayi, and neither of these or nor any others have this revivalist spirit. The only thing is the time for Islam has come. Everything else has failed, and this is the time for Islam. The finger that testifies that there is no God but Allah refuses to testify other than Him. The Ummah must be restored to its original form so that Islam can once again perform its appointed role as leader of humankind. Not just Muslims, but all of humanity. That is its historical role and position, and that is where we must go. And all the other systems have failed. To assume the leadership of humankind, then it is essential to have a quality other than material creativity. This is none other than the faith and way of life. So it's not enough to be good scientist, etc. You have to have faith, and that will give you leadership of the world community. The entire world today exists in a state of jahiliyya. Jahiliyya rests in transgression of God's authority. God alone is sovereign. Anybody who denies that is basically living in the world of jahiliyya. From this transgression against Allah's authority ensues the abuse of His creatures, capitalism, colonialism, all the other horrible things, etc., are a product of the fact that God's authority has been transgressed. We need a vanguard for this revival. The vanguard committed to such an undertaking must recognize the signposts along the road to know the nature of its role, the essence of its task, the purpose of its commitments, and the point of its departure on this long journey. So we're going to go on this long journey. We're going to restore Islam, and on the way we are going to see many, many signposts. And that's the name of his book, Milestones, Signposts, etc. The primary source of Islamic civilization was the Quran. So what went wrong according to Sayyid Qutb? He says primary source was Quran. It was from the Quran that the Sahaba took inspiration, etc. There is thus no doubt that the dilution of this primary source was the principal determinant of the clear difference between those later generations and the unique and distinctive first generation. The first generation took all its inspiration from the Quran. The Hadith had not been written. That doesn't necessarily mean that he's a Quranist in that sense, but he really is saying that the Quran is the most important, and so on. The Quran was not revealed as a totality. Instead, it was revealed in stages, according to evolving needs, the constant development of ideas and concepts, the growth of society and human life, and the practical problems facing the Muslim community in real life. This will become a very important argument, as you see, because many people will use, when they use certain ayats in the Quran to say certain things, etc., the Ikhwan will argue that those were in a different phase in the movement of Islam. So there's a phase in the movement of Islam where Islam is not in, or the Muslims are not in war with the kuffar, etc. They are still preaching in the peaceful phase, and then they move to a phase of stalemate, and then they move to a phase of strategic advantage, etc. So in these three phases, three different kinds of ayats are revealed, and that's what you have to understand, that you cannot take an ayat from the peaceful phase and apply it to another phase, etc. The Sahaba would make a complete separation from the Jahili society surrounding him, a radical detachment from the Jahili environment and its social ties to it, including their culture, their art, their literature, their rules, their laws, everything. And that's what we need, okay? Enough of this interaction with Jahili society, like for example studying at LUMS and so on and so forth, which is filling your mind with all kinds of nonsense, etc. You have to separate yourself from it. Now this is obviously quite, in a certain sense, quite radical as well. And it's not like he hasn't gone to university and so on, and he's been part of that society, but now he's like, no, you have to cut ourselves off. If you don't cut yourselves off, you will never be able to achieve that purity, etc. You have to break with them. We must also divest ourselves of all Jahili influences in which we live and from which we draw. Instruction is for the sake of action rather than for study or pleasure. Okay, we have to cut ourselves off, and then we have to take action. We must rid ourselves of the oppression of Jahili society, Jahil ideas, Jahili tradition, and Jahil leadership, etc. Of course, he means very strongly here, Gamal Abdul Nasir is one of the primary people and the movement that's happening. So, to conclude, the view that democracy, socialism, rationalism have all failed is a sweeping generalization based on little evidence. I mean, it's fine to say, oh, the West is not doing well here and there, etc. But you compare the West with what's going on in the rest of the world, they seem to be doing much better than the rest of the world, that's for sure, right? So this is a bit of a, in my views, and it offers very little evidence to sort of support his view. It's just a sweeping generalization. He says everything has failed and now is the time for Islam. Well, it's not necessarily entirely true that everything has failed in that particular way. People still have a lot of trust and faith in those things, etc. And so it might be a bit of a sweeping generalization. He's also equating all secular governments as equally culpable and is lumping together those who are fighting against imperialism, like for example the Arab socialists, with those who are supporting imperialism, the Zionists and Western colonists, etc. Which I also think is kind of unfair and not quite right, etc. I mean, there are lots of secular people who are actually very much against colonialism. And then there are obviously people who are secular people who are pro-colonialism. Just as there are religious people, Christians, who are very pro-colonialism. And vice versa, they were also liberation, theology, etc., who were fundamentally anti-colonial. So lumping everybody together into this sort of thing, and especially not to recognize that there's an actual very strong cleavage between those who were on the left of the political spectrum, who always argued against capitalism, colonialism, imperialism, and those who were on the right of the political spectrum, I think is, again, lumping two very different things together. Also, to denounce the entire world as Jahiliyyah tends towards an intellectual isolation from the progress made in the rest of the world. You cut yourself off from everything else that's happening in the rest of the world, then I think, there are things that all those jahils in the West are doing that they're doing better than we're doing. They're creating artificial intelligence and internet, and they're sending people to the moon and to space, etc. And they're discovering the cure for cancer and lots of different things. It would be absolutely wrong, I think, for Muslim civilization to close itself off from all other civilizations that are not Muslim. Because even in the golden period of Islam, as you studied, in fact, we learned from, Muslims learned from all other civilizations. They learned from Indian civilization, from whom we took the Arabic, what is called now the Arabic numeral system, is actually the Hindu numeral system. We took the concept of zeros from I keep saying we took, I don't know, Muslims took, or Arabs rather, took the concept from us, because I am actually from here, right? So they took the idea of the zero from us Desis. We created the concept of zero. We were more advanced in math than the Arabs, etc. And they took paper from the Chinese, and and philosophy from the Greeks, and medicine and other things, etc. And these were all useful for civilization. So cutting yourself off from other civilizations, it appears to me to be a formula for intellectual isolation. Last, the emphasis on action has been interpreted as a call to assassinate secular leaders like Gamal Abdel Nasser and other nationalists. So this whole thing about we must take action, we must take action, we must take action, although it doesn't specify what kind of action, but in the context of the time when all this fight between the secular pan-Arab socialists, etc., which Nasser was, versus the Islamists, was really hitting that mark. To write this at that particular point in time, this evocative sort of language, was interpreted by many people as justifying, that kind of attack. Because obviously, if they're jahils and they represent, the Dore Jahiliyyah, and they're outside the pale of Islam and so on, then they're not covered by any contract that we have with them. We don't have to honor, or Muslims don't have to honor any kind of contract with them whatsoever. You don't have to protect their lives or property or whatever, because they've been declared kafirs, or they've been declared jahils. So his criticism is mainly sort of generic with respect to secularism, and says socialism is purely a secular doctrine. Yes. He doesn't make much of an economic criticism as such. He's not even interested in going there, because for him, he has this sweeping position that anything that is based on secularism is basically jahalat. So he's not going into the intricacies of, okay, a socialist economy will function this way. He doesn't bother with that. It's the epistemology of socialism that he has an issue with. It's the philosophical assumptions of socialism that he has a problem with. Because the philosophical assumptions of socialism is basically based on the ideas of a scientific analysis, right? It's not a religious doctrine as such. And that to him is just right there is something that we cannot allow ourselves to be guided by anything that is based on that kind of scientific. Science has a certain instrumental value, he'll give you that, but it should not have a value of how to organize society. That is too much power that you've given science. And that's what socialism at the end of the day says that exactly. That, we're going to do a scientific analysis and we're going to figure out the problems, how we're going to solve them. right? No, he doesn't like that. And that's the same with democracy, liberal governments, all governments of that nature, post-Enlightenment governments. He has an equal problem with all of them. And he's not even really ready to concede that there's some difference between them. He's like, no, it doesn't matter. It's all pretty much the same.